Welcome to my channel, Vibes of Life. In today's video, I want to take you back to a moment I'll never forget, the night when fear gripped me so tightly I couldn't breathe. It was just past 2 a.m. The world outside was silent, and yet, inside my mind, it felt like a war zone. Racing thoughts, pounding heart, the weight of everything I couldn't fix pressing down on me. I had tried everything: therapy, meditation, long walks, even forcing myself to smile through it. But that night, something inside me broke. Or maybe it finally cracked open just enough to let something in. That something was a single verse. Just one. And it wasn't just read. It struck like lightning. I wasn't raised deeply religious. I admired thinkers like C.S. Lewis from a distance. His logic, his wit, his humility. But I never expected his sermons or biblical insight to pierce through years of anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. That night, as I scrolled through an old recording of one of Lewis's reflections, I heard him quote a verse that landed like a quiet bomb in my soul. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no voice from above. But in that small, still moment, something shifted. And that's where this story begins. This video isn't just about theology. It's about the battle so many of us fight in silence, the invisible struggle of mental health. Fear has a way of dressing itself up as caution, logic, or even wisdom. It can sound like a friend, warning you not to get hurt again. But in truth, fear is a thief. It stole years of my peace, joy, and sleep. And I know I'm not alone. If you've ever felt like you're drowning in your own thoughts, or like no one really sees the weight you're carrying, then this story is for you. We'll walk together through the moments that led up to that life-changing night. You'll meet Sarah, my closest friend, and one of the only people who saw behind the mask I wore every day. You'll hear about the failed attempt at a normal life I was trying to hold together. And you'll understand why this one Bible verse, simple as it was, became the sword I used to cut through fear's lies. I'll share the exact verse and how Lewis's interpretation brought it to life in a way I had never heard before. But more importantly, I'll open up about what happened next, because here's the truth. When light first enters darkness, the darkness doesn't leave quietly. The moment I began to heal was also the moment everything around me started to shake. There's a reason fear clings so tightly, and the battle to break free was just beginning. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me had started to stir. That one verse, still echoing in my mind, was like a thread I couldn't stop pulling. It wasn't even a long verse, just a few simple words, yet they held so much weight it felt like they were speaking directly to the storm in me. And the way C.S. Lewis had explained it, he didn't just quote it, he unpacked it in a way that made it feel real, like it wasn't just ancient scripture, but a lifeline meant for people like me, people who smile in public and fall apart in silence, people who pray but still feel alone, people who want to believe but don't know how. That verse didn't magically erase everything, of course. If anything, it made things more intense at first. The days that followed were full of moments where I felt like I was standing at the edge of something deep and unknown. I'd be driving and suddenly tears would well up without warning. Not sadness, not exactly. More like a release of something I'd held in for too long. Memories I hadn't thought about in years started surfacing. Fights I'd had with my parents, the breakup that shattered my confidence, even something a teacher once said to me in middle school that I never realized I had carried for so long. Sarah noticed. She always noticed. "You've been quieter than usual," she said one morning, handing me a cup of coffee. I told her about the verse. I told her how Lewis had described fear as something we feed without even knowing it. How we build our lives around it, even call it wisdom, when it's actually keeping us from becoming who we're meant to be. She didn't say much at first. She just listened, which was her gift. But then she said something I'll never forget. You know, it's scary when the truth starts to heal you, because healing doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels like chaos. And she was right. Things didn't get easier after that night. In fact, they got stranger. I started noticing things, certain people pulling away, unexpected doors closing, and then, one night, a conversation with a stranger took everything I thought I understood and turned it upside down. What he said shook me, and somehow it all tied back to that verse. The stranger was sitting alone on a park bench, just past the bookstore I sometimes wandered into when I needed to quiet my mind. He looked ordinary, maybe in his 60s, wearing an old coat and holding a book in his lap. I wouldn't have noticed him if he hadn't spoken first. "Fear always waits for permission," he said, without looking up. At first, I thought he was talking to someone else, but there was no one else around. I stood still for a moment, unsure if I should walk away or ask him what he meant. Something told me to stay. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. He closed the book slowly, looked up at me and smiled like he already knew why I was there. "It waits for you to open the door," he said. "Most people don't realize they've been opening that door their whole life, until something finally slams it shut." His words hit something deep in me. It was strange, unsettling even. He didn't know me, and yet, somehow, he was speaking right into my conflict. The verse that had sparked this shift in my mental health was about fear, perfect love casting it out. But here I was, days later, feeling more exposed than ever. Was I healing or unraveling? That night, I found myself questioning everything again. Was I really ready to face what I'd buried? I began to notice how often fear had disguised itself in my life, in my relationships, my choices, even in the things I prayed for. I'd been asking for peace, but living as if disaster was always one step away. And now that something was changing in me, the world around me started to resist. It was like fear didn't want to leave quietly, and it wasn't going down without a fight. The shift became impossible to ignore. Little things began going wrong. Missed messages, sudden misunderstandings with friends, a strange heaviness that followed me even in familiar places. Sarah noticed it too. "It's like something stirring that doesn't want to be seen," she said one evening as we walked through our neighborhood. The air felt colder than usual, even though it was spring. She glanced over at me, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if the fear you're letting go of was never just yours to carry?" Her words unsettled me. I couldn't shake the thought that maybe fear had been passed down, shaped by voices I trusted, reinforced by habits I thought were normal. Maybe that's why letting go of it felt so disruptive. I began waking up in the middle of the night again, heart pounding, as if something unseen had entered the room. And every time it happened, that one Bible verse would come rushing back into my mind. "Perfect love casts out fear." But the more I clung to those words, the more chaos seemed to rise. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years started reaching out, some with encouraging words, others warning me not to go too far with this faith journey. One message in particular stood out. It came from an old mentor, someone I once looked up to deeply. The message was kind, but laced with doubt. "Be careful," it said. "People lose themselves chasing peace." Those words haunted me. What if I was losing myself? What if this wasn't healing at all, but a slow collapse? And yet, underneath the confusion, there was something else growing, something that refused to be silenced. I was standing at the edge of something bigger than I understood, and whatever was coming next was already on its way. 2 days later, something happened that I still can't explain fully. I was sitting in the same spot where I had first heard the verse, the quiet corner of my living room where I usually avoided deep thoughts. I had opened my journal to write, hoping to find clarity in the mess of emotions that had taken over. But as soon as I started writing, my hands froze, not out of fear, but because the words coming out didn't feel like mine. It was like someone else was writing through me. Not in a supernatural way, but more like my soul had taken the pen. The words were raw, honest, deeper than anything I'd ever written, and they all pointed back to that same verse, that same battle. But now there was a new thread, something I hadn't expected. Buried in the middle of that writing was a name, a person I hadn't thought about in years. Michael. Someone who had once been like a brother to me, until fear destroyed that bond too. We had walked closely through life for a season, but one misunderstanding turned into silence, and silence turned into years. And now his name was right there on the page, bold and clear, like a knock on a locked door. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just memory surfacing. But that night, I got a message request on my phone, from Michael. I stared at the screen, not sure if I was awake or dreaming. He simply wrote, "Hey, I don't know why, but I've been thinking about you. Are you okay?" I didn't respond right away. I couldn't, because now I knew this wasn't just about me. The verse hadn't just been a comfort for my anxiety. It was opening up unfinished stories, long-buried pain, and unexpected bridges. And part of me wondered, what if the fear I had been carrying all these years had destroyed more than just my peace of mind? Something was being brought to the surface, something that wasn't ready to stay buried. And whatever had started with that verse was now digging deeper, unearthing more than I was prepared for. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to break open, not just in me, but around me, and I was running out of time to decide what to do next. I finally responded to Michael's message. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop we used to hang out at years ago. As I walked in, I felt like I was stepping into a memory, one lined with laughter, old pain, and words we never said. He looked different, older, a little more tired. But when he smiled, it was like no time had passed. We didn't waste much time on small talk. We just dove in, as if we both knew this moment had been building for years. "I don't know what brought me here," he said, looking down at his coffee. "I just had this sense you were going through something, and I couldn't ignore it." I nodded slowly and told him everything. The fear, the verse, the night everything shifted. I even read it to him right there at the table. "There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear." He didn't say anything for a long while. Then he leaned back, eyes wet, and said, "I think that verse saved me too. You're not the only one who's been drowning." We sat there in silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because something had been healed in that stillness. It wasn't dramatic. There was no booming voice, no miraculous sign, just the quiet power of truth, spoken and received. That verse, which had once felt like a whisper in the dark, had now become a bridge, reconnecting what fear had broken. But just as I felt that deep relief settle in, the final twist came. As I reached for my phone to show Michael something I had journaled, a notification popped up from Sarah. Only 3 words. "Don't trust him." My heart skipped. I read it again. The same Sarah who had stood beside me through everything, now warning me against the one person who finally brought me peace. Everything inside me tightened. Could she be wrong, or had I missed something important in my search for healing? The verse still echoed in my mind, but now it carried a question. Was I being led toward restoration, or into another shadow I didn't see coming? I sat there staring at Sarah's message, my fingers frozen above the screen, the swirl of peace, confusion and doubt mixed all at once. Michael was watching me closely, sensing something had shifted. I didn't tell him right away. I needed time to process. So we ended the conversation politely, with a promise to talk again soon, and went our separate ways. But something had changed in me, and I knew I needed to talk to Sarah. That night, we sat on my porch, the kind of quiet between us that only comes when two people truly care. I showed her the message from Michael and told her everything we had talked about. She listened with her usual patience, then took a deep breath. "I wasn't trying to scare you," she said. "I just know how deep wounds can run, and I didn't want you to mistake relief for healing. Sometimes we rush back into broken places because they feel familiar. I just wanted you to be sure." Her words didn't come from jealousy or fear. They came from love, the kind of love that casts out fear. And in that moment I realized the verse hadn't been about one person or one solution. It was about learning to live from a place of truth, about recognizing how often fear had made my decisions for me, shaped my relationships, and colored my view of myself. But now I could see it more clearly. I wasn't trapped anymore. Michael and I did speak again, but with slower steps. We rebuilt, not from a need to fix the past, but with mutual understanding of who we'd become. Some friendships return, and some transform. Either way, love, not fear, had the final say. As for Sarah, she stayed right where she'd always been, in my corner, steady, honest, and the reminder that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like a whisper that becomes a truth, like a verse that seems small but moves mountains inside you. So if you're watching this and you're caught in fear or stuck in a place that feels too heavy to name, remember this: fear waits for permission, but so does peace. And sometimes all it takes is one verse to remind you which voice to follow.